All right, hello. It's great. This has been sort of a great setup to talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing at the Public Knowledge Project. I wear sort of multiple hats, so I'm an assistant professor, so that's why you see the SFU logo. That's the program where I teach. I'm an associate director with the Public Knowledge Project. And I direct a research group called the Scholarly Communications Lab. That's the ScholComm Lab, where we do a bunch of research on scholarly communication. So I try to put everything on the slide in some corner or another so that you have it all there. But today I'm really going to talk a little bit about what PKP is. So the Public Knowledge Project, for those that are not familiar with it, is a project, and it's right there in the name. It's actually a project. We're not an organization. We don't exist as an NGO. We don't exist as a company or as a business. We're really a university-based research project. And if that sounds like, would you want to have your scholarly communications infrastructure relying on something that has just a project status at a university, I'll let you know we've been around since 1998, so we're entering into our third decade of producing software that supports scholarly communication in various ways. And so Open Journal Systems, the software I'll talk about most today, has been in existence since 2001. And when people think about sustainability and the way that these projects can exist, what I like to sort of remind people is that these things can take very many different forms. That sustainability is not just about having a business model where you're selling things and are able to produce enough revenue. It's about having a pathway towards being able to continue to do what you've been doing. And we've been working in this space for, like I said, over 20 years at this point. PKP's mission is more than just producing software or more than just doing any one thing in scholarly communications. Really, the goal of the project is to both increase the quantity and the quality of the knowledge that's available to the public, right? And to increase the global participation, so both the quantity again and the quality of the global participation in producing that knowledge. And so everything that we do and the software that we create is really for the purposes of fulfilling those goals. And we do a whole bunch of other activities as well. And I want to talk a little bit about those because I think it's important to think about why it is that we work with open source and why it is that the role that open source plays in the DNA of what PKP is. In most people's minds, actually, though, even though we have this broader mission that's about increasing the quality and the quantity of knowledge available to the public. In most people's minds, though, when they think about PKP, they think about OJS. And in fact, in many instances, I hear the two terms sort of used, the two acronyms sort of used interchangeably as if they're one and the same. And this is perhaps not surprising given the penetration that OJS has had. And so when, maybe it's now being used by over 10,000 journals, and unfortunately that, a little cut off there on the right, but on the left. But it's used by over 10,000 journals around the world. So we have, there's over 2,000, almost 3,000 journals in Brazil alone, and we have in all of Latin America, there's over 3,000 journals, over 2,000 journals in East Asia and the Pacific, in Europe. So we basically have, a little bit of world domination with the use of open journal systems. And when we see this is the number of journals that are being published, that as of 2015 had at least 10 articles published using open journal systems. Again, we see that the content, so things published with 2015 publishing dates. So that's where we get the 10,000 number, and there's content going back. There's hundreds of journals that have their back content going back to the 90s in OJS as well. So we see that there's an interest, and the platform has sort of proven itself as being a platform that's useful for people wanting to do scholarly publishing from a very wide range of contexts. So when we start thinking about there isn't just any one model that works, there's no way that we would be able to have 10,000 journals using the software in all of those languages, in all of those countries, and all of those diverse contents if the software in some way didn't fulfill the needs of those users. And how a little bit how OJS helps to fulfill that mission I talked about increasing the amount of content and the amount of knowledge that's available to the public and also the quality of that knowledge. Well, for one, I think because OJS is open source, it's freely available, it has very minimal requirements in terms of what what server infrastructure is needed to be able to run it. It really lowers the barrier to entry of who is able to produce a journal in the first place. You don't require a large amount of, we see a lot of small journals starting with almost no capital or even technical expertise able to launch a journal, which increases the number of sort of who is able to participate, who is able to publish. By being a whole manuscript management from the moment of submission all the way through to publication, actually OJS is unique. It's almost, I think, the only platform that really is in one platform where it has all the way from submission, peer review, production, and then through to publication all in one single platform. So it streamlined that journal, which lowers the cost of producing journals, which from our perspective is one of the driving missions to enable open access, these journals to operate in an open access because their cost is lower. It, through its design, has always sort of educated users on the best practices, and so we've been very conscious about putting elements in the UI that were intended to sort of educate people that might actually be trying to produce journals without having the expertise to do so, and have the journal sort of educate them in how to operate things better, which in turn improves the quality of the journals that are being produced. And it has all of these elements around organizing the metadata, displaying it in meta tags, making it interoperable, linking it to a whole bunch of other systems. And so being an open source project, we sort of have all of these integrations with these other things. In that sense, we continue to sort of try to be part of that larger ecosystem. So all of those things which help improve the discoverability and make that knowledge all available to everyone. But I think in reality, PKP, and I want to sort of just spend a minute talking about this, PKP is actually much more than OJS. Like I said, we have that broader mission that isn't just about producing software or isn't just about improving the software that's available. We recently went through sort of a review process, and I just wanted to throw this link up there. We sort of went through a strategic review process where we consulted with the community, we spoke to experts, we spoke to dozens of, we had sort of a third-party consultant speak to members of the community, past, potential, and current users of our software and services. And I've now sort of started to really organize everything that we do. We've always sort of done a million things, but now we've tried to organize those things into sort of three different broad areas of what we do. We've sort of realized that this is one, it's a sort of a cleaner way for us to think about it, instead of having people like me wearing three different hats and trying to do three different things and thinking about how they relate back to PKP. And so the main thing, or the first thing that we do is the software. OJS is just one of them. We have another software for managing conferences, which we haven't actually been working on very actively these days, but we still have it there, Open Conference Systems. We have an equivalent software for managing monographs, Open Monograph Press, which again is the same kind of workflow intended for university presses for producing scholarly books. We have a typesetting stack for converting documents from Word to JATS XML. All produced with as open source, all with free support in our forums, and all with community contributions. And so everything that we've done has always been with that open source philosophy. And then sort of a big area, and this is where I spend actually most of my time, is around the research, education, and advocacy work that we do. So we do research on open access, I do a lot of work around studying audiences, around alternative metrics. John Walensky, who's the director of the project, does work on intellectual properties and the histories of intellectual properties, on economic models. I have a project on incentive structures and looking at review, tenure, and promotion guidelines. All of these things are part of learning about scholarly publishing. And then we do advocacy and participation at events. I mean, my presence here today is sort of part of this sort of being present and having a voice in the community, trying to shape the conversation around what scholarly publishing is and who should be included in that, and trying to make sure we advocate specifically or particularly for those people working from other parts of the world in a scholarly communications ecosystem that tends to be dominated by a US or European discourse and models and requirements, and trying to make sure that we bring in those voices, as well as doing education. And lastly, we do provide publishing services. So we provide hosting of our software, and these things we do as a cost recovery mechanism. So we do have sort of professional publishing services, as well as providing preservation, index, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing around providing open source article level metrics. A lot of people, when they think about PKP, we've had 20 years, means that some of our software had been a little bit it was a little long in the tooth. OJS, a lot of the experiences and things that people know about OJS are related back to OJS 2. But last year we released OJS 3, which is now full version 3.1 is now being used in production by I actually don't have the numbers on how many journals, but it's now it's been rolling out. And it starts to look a lot more modern than OJS 2 did, but more importantly, it's set up so that now it's possible for people to provide different skins to it and change the look and feel in much easier than it was in OJS 2. So I just wanted to show a couple of some of the demonstration themes that we've got around what the publishing thing looks like on the front end. But on the back end also, we've completely overhauled the interfaces from what OJS 2 used to look like. And I'm not showing an OJS 2 screenshot by comparison because I spent 10 years showing those OJS 2 screenshots and teaching workshops on it, and I can't stand to look at it anymore. But OJS 3, now I think, and the reception that we've had from OJS 3 has been extremely positive around how things are organized. So it's a complete, now all OJS instances will have a common look and feel. Before, if you've skinned the front end, it would also skin the back end, and that created a whole bunch of confusion for the authors, for the reviewers, for the editors who would participate in multiple journals. And so now we've got so again, a completely overhauled dashboard in the back end for working on publications. We've got sort of the sidebar navigation now. Instead of in the old OJS, you used to always have to go back to like a user home in the middle. Now we've sort of have streamlined. These are all going, now we'll go through a more extensive user experience testing and actually working through things with our users. And so we've got sort of the sidebar navigation. We've got a task-based workflow. So whenever something needs to be done, this was always a critique of OJS 2, is that people would log on to the system and not know what they were supposed to work with next. So now you've got a list of sort of tasks and things that you need to do. And when you click on that, it just takes you straight to the submission at the proper appropriate stage, so that it's clear what it is that you've, that as an editor, as a reviewer, as an author, what it is that's being asked of you and what you need to do next. It's got completely sort of configurable roles in terms of both what the roles are called and who should be participating, as well as at what stage they should be participating in. So, you know, if you have editors that should probably be participating at every stage, but you also might have an editor that's only in charge of taking care of putting through things through the copy editing stage, or we have sort of guest editors that you only want them to sort of manage the peer review, but then it's going to go off to the general editor to work on when taking it through to publication once the review has been managed. So now we've got a completely configurable workflow in terms of who participates and what stages of the workflow they participate in. One of the things that makes OJS unique is that it actually is set up for to default work with in multiple languages, and I just want to show here a little bit what putting in an input where people can put in one language, and they can see if they haven't done the translation, they can put the translation, and they go back and they got the little green marker to show that, okay, you've now put it into both languages. So OJS is one of the only platforms really set up to work in a global context. So people can have multiple language publications, interfaces, submissions, and all of the inputs. Let me just sort of skip forward a little bit. I just want to say two sort of quick other things that we're working on. So that's sort of OJS, and I could sort of go through what the process of reviewing and editing looks like. But there's a couple of other initiatives that I just want to highlight very quickly in the minute that I have remaining. One is what we're working on doing sort of XML markup and editing and integrating these into the platform to have a document-centric workflow, and as well to be able to publish straight from XML. And so we're part of working with Substance around XML editing with eLife, Cielo, and others to be able to produce, to be able to do the conversions first, and then to be able to work within OJS, so that when you're working inside of a submission, you can hit the convert to XML button and you end up with an XML added to your files. And then once you do that, then you can go in and edit with the Substance editor to edit within, and we'll integrate this entirely within OJS with syncing the metadata that's in the XML document with the metadata that's in the database. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention quickly is that we're also so that's all again based on open source tools. And again, another thing that we're doing based on open source tools is providing an open source altmetrics ecosystem. And so that we're relying on data from Crossref event data, which it's is still about to be released. We partnered with Impact Story to build PaperBuzz. And so Impact Story developed the tool with our support and with our, and sort of collaborating with them on what was needed. And now we've developed visualizations that will be basically a JavaScript library that anyone can plug and play into their journals, as long as you basically just configure into the JavaScript the DOI that you want to pull from, and then it'll, in whatever journal, whatever publication, website you want to have these things, this little JavaScript library will pull from PaperBuzz, and PaperBuzz is essentially a wrapper around Crossref event data. So we figured out what was needed, again here, all based on open source tools, so that article level metrics can be available to anyone for free. That's it. Thank you.
Any questions for Juan while John's up? So you mentioned a few times the idea of quality. And of course, like there's a lot of quality in the platform and the tools that make it available to publish. And I'm just curious, like I know that you're aware of predatory publishing and the idea that not all journals may be using that platform are considered quality. So I just wondered if you had thoughts on that, or if you know of any study that's looked at the journals in terms of the output quality.
Yeah, so we've done, so there's two parts of this. One is that we've looked at, we have an initiative underway around sort of what we sort of call journal integrity, in terms of looking at what are the things that we can do as the people that provide the platform to make it easier for journals to show that they're really undergoing a real review process of the publication. So this is sort of the thing that distinguishes what I would consider predatory is things that they're not undergoing peer review. Because we have this unique system where the back end and the front end are integrated into one, where you can actually do things around being able to display things and showing some of the statistics and making more visible the statistics of what's gone on in the review process. And so one of the things that we're looking into doing is essentially exposing some of those statistics so that people can optionally be able to display what's going on and what do they have in their records for how many people reviewed, what was the time that things spent under review, and so on. So that if people are going to use the platform for publishing, let's say, legitimate journals, they'll have to essentially be continuously faking the data in the background as well, and again, just making it a little bit harder for them to do that. The question around the quality of the content is a very tricky one, especially or doing some kind of an evaluation of it. And I say that from someone that works and has spent a lot of time working in contexts where research, the culture of doing research and the practice of learning to do research are still not as consolidated as they have been in places where the research has been done for so long. I see enabling people to publish even when they are still not doing the research that we might consider to be the highest quality is an important function that OJS plays in enabling the creation of those stepping stone places where people can sort of learn to start doing the process of publishing. You need to start with some bad publications maybe and for people to learn how to do the process of editing, for people to learn how to write and communicate the research. And so that for us, we don't see a journal producing sort of low quality research publishing on OJS as a problem. We see it as part of enabling that ecosystem. We don't want those people to not have a place to publish at all, as if you can go from not knowing what you're doing to publishing in the highest quality journal. OJS has really enabled that ecosystem to be created in the first place.